So something a little bit different this episode. We've decided to take some questions from the listeners, stroke viewers, and just diving in straight into the big one. We've got Oh God Jiu-Jitsu asking that he'd love to hear our thoughts on what is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in 2025. He feels that we have gi Jiu-Jitsu and submission grappling, and it feels like there is a difference between kind of the martial art and almost like prize fighting.
Yes, that's a pretty good distinction, I suppose. Yeah, I mean, they're both martial arts for sure. It's definitely trending towards submission grappling being the prize fighting side of the sport. And gi jiu-jitsu is maybe, outside of Brazil, is maybe lagging behind on the professional side. Like Polaris, for example, we used to have quite a lot of gi matches, and I really enjoy the gi matches. I think every gi match we've ever put on has been amazing. But it just seems to naturally be happening less and less. But I don't think the gi is dead by any means. I think, what was it? Was it 12,000 competitors or something at
Masters Worlds?
Masters Worlds?
Yeah, it's huge.
Bonkers.
All of the four IBJJF major tournaments, the Europeans, Pans, Brazilian Nationals, Worlds, and then you've got to consider Masters Worlds, even though it's not in that circuit. It's the whole Jiu-Jitsu convention where it has multiple tournaments in the same weekend. All of those events are absolutely massive, and they dwarf anything in the world that is like a submission grappling or no-gi event. The martial art of Jiu-Jitsu is alive and well. And there is, if anything, it's bigger than it ever has been, and it continues to grow. But you're right, outside of Brazil, it's hard to point to a professional level pro event that features gi matches. There aren't really any, There's the IBJJF Crown, I suppose, which is an annual event at sort of the end of the season. It's in November. And they have big cash prizes for, certain athletes who are invited to compete. But very few people are doing professional gi matches outside of Brazil nowadays. So I definitely think that there's a separation between the two. Submission grappling in the world in general seems to be like the pro ranks. And then Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I've said this before, but I feel that it is an amateur sport played by professionals.
Yeah.
Right? Because these guys train like pros. They live like pros. They are, in effect, for all intents and purposes, they are 100% professional athletes. They dedicate their entire lives to this, but they're really paid if you compete in the gi.
Yeah. I mean, there's two things there. One is we sort of struggle to delineate between professional and amateur in our sport. There's a lot of people dipping their toes in both, which is another topic entirely. And then the other, I guess, is that maybe it feels more natural to have kind of no-gi or submission grappling as the prize fighting side of it because of its proximity to MMA and the kind of blueprint that's laid down by the UFC and, all MMA organizations. I think it's just too jarring for that audience to see people in a gi. But only a couple of events ago, we had, I think, 3 major gi matches in a row. We had Tynan, we had Diego Pato,
Colomate.
And Colomate, yeah, it was.
Yeah, and they were all awesome.
Yeah, really, really nice matches. So, like, we love a gi match on Polaris, and just because you're doing no gi, it doesn't mean it's inherently more exciting. You can get really smelly no gi matches for sure.
For sure, yeah. And that leads really well into the next question from Zach Smart. The thoughts on the gi within the sport. Could we see more super fights, or is it dying? When he says, is it dying? I'm assuming he's talking about the gi in general, or maybe gi super fights. But my response to that is no, the gi is not dying if you look at the majority of people who actually train jiu-jitsu on a day-to-day basis, because the vast majority of gyms probably have 95% gi classes as opposed to no gi. Yeah, there are some no gi schools out there nowadays. It's quite trendy. Some schools are going all no gi, but the majority of schools might have a handful of no gi classes per week.
Yeah.
And the the tournaments. Like, you look at the sheer number of people who are signing up for no-gi tournaments compared to the gi. Like I said, just using the IBJJF as a benchmark, but considering all the other sort of lower level regional or domestic federations that run open tournaments, and the gi divisions are always way, way bigger than no-gi. And I would ask you, possibly, as somebody who sells both gi and no-gi gear, like, do you see that reflected in like total sales? Sort of,
Yeah, my experience both at the gym at Ippon where I train and also in terms of sales, the gi is not going anywhere, but no gi is rapidly expanding. So, like, using the gym as an example, the gi classes are still packed, still busy, but the no gi classes are getting more and more busy. I feel like if you're starting now, you kind of have a choice. I mean, I don't know. It could almost be as simple as like, well, if you want to do a no-gi class, you just turn up in shorts and a t-shirt. If you want to do a gi class, you got to go and buy this 60, 70, 80 quid gi and a belt. That's one side of it. And then, in terms of sales, gi's always been strong, but no-gi is just coming right up behind it and doing really well. So, I mean, they're also cheaper items, so maybe it's an easier choice, but yeah, I'd say gi is growing, and no-gi is growing more rapidly. I don't know if it would overtake the gi, but it's definitely growing really quickly. Yeah. And the other part of the question, will we see more super fights? I think so. Yeah, but you need sort of compelling athletes and compelling stories. It just seems like no-gi has all the momentum at the moment.
I agree with that. I do agree with that. I think that if you look at the IBJJF Worlds, for example, over the last couple of years, just using the black belt ranks as a sort of an example, that you had, with 10 weight categories, including the absolute, you can't have a superstar in every single division. There's always going to be some divisions which are better than others. But I felt like you usually had around about sort of 5 to 6 really compelling standout athletes in each, throughout those divisions. And really, you were invested in following multiple guys' path through the tournament towards becoming champion. And I feel that that's been whittled down over the last couple of years because a number of those guys have elected not to compete anymore in the gi. And they are, I believe, either retired or they've shifted focus to no gi. And I feel like that number of the really high profile guys has definitely gone down. There's still some really, really good ones, but not as many for sure. This leads really well into the next question from Jermaine X. Is it harder for gi athletes to make a living in jiu-jitsu? Well, that's a good question, but it depends. We really need to define how they make that living, I suppose, right? Because if they're talking about making a living from getting paid to compete, to be honest, not that many people are making a living from competing. The majority of athletes will make their living elsewhere, and it'll be through DVD sales, it'll be through seminars, it'll be through camps, and for many, many people, it'll just be through owning the gym and teaching day to day, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. I think it's a myth that people are out there making loads of money from competing. Apart from a handful of people on a handful of events, the vast majority of people are, getting paid a small amount to fight one weekend and then paying $500 to go compete somewhere random in Europe the next weekend. So I'd almost say it's still easier for a gi athlete to make a living because the gi, in terms of like boots on the ground, is more popular. So I think if you're specializing in that, it's easier for you to make a living. Yeah, at the moment.
Yeah, I think there are some standout examples of no-gi guys who make considerably more money through things like instructional sales than in the gi. Of course, if you look at the big sellers on BJJ Fanatics, it's dominated by John Danaher, Gordon Ryan, Greg Jones, and only John is putting out any gi material. So the no-gi instructional material is definitely the best selling for sure. But in terms of, like you say, in terms of the sort of the opportunities to run a school, to teach seminars, to teach camps, I feel like probably the gi guys are making more overall from that. But just going back to what you were saying about sort of the amount of money that you might make to compete. I remember Fionn posted something a while back about how she basically saves all the super fight money that she makes. She basically, everything that she gets from super fights, she just treats as savings, and she doesn't rely on that money at all. And the majority of her income will come from teaching classes, teaching seminars. Joao Miao is somebody who's been very transparent on how much money he makes, because he's teaching and traveling to, non-stop. He has his school in New York, but he's always doing seminars all over the world. And he quite often posts, so, this seminar, I made this much money this weekend, which is pretty interesting, because not too many people are quite so open about that kind of thing. But Joao is not getting called to compete very often in cash prize events at this point in his career. And
he also made his name in the gi.
He absolutely did. But if you think about it, he can teach 3 seminars in a weekend and make thousands and thousands. But he could only compete, once in a super fight, maybe every month or something like that. So yeah, the amount of money that he makes in the gi is going to be way more than he could ever in no gi.
Yeah, we come up against that problem quite a lot, because the really, really high level guys have a choice between, or girls have a choice between competing and getting paid a certain amount, and potentially losing, potentially getting some catastrophic injury, or just doing 3 or 4 seminars in a row and making the same, if not more, and being taken out for dinner every night and not really having to do too much work. So yeah, we come up against that at the high levels.
Yeah. We've kind of separated these questions by sort of theme. So the last question in this particular section, just talking about jiu-jitsu and grappling in general. Good question from Paul7 BJJ. What currently is the biggest cultural problem in BJJ stroke grappling? Cultural problem. That's an interesting question. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, maybe 2 things. Maybe steroids.
Yeah, that's a big one.
And maybe a kind of lingering misogyny from the early days of the sport in Brazil.
That's another big one for sure.
Yeah, like steroids, definitely. I think the cultural problem is just how normalized and accepted it has become, largely driven by kind of unapologetic and unrepentant people at the top of the sport. I mean, it's filtering down to the point where normal people in the gym are taking steroids, which is fucking insane to me. Absolutely insane. Or they do like fake TRT where their testosterone levels are perfectly fine, but some private company will just happily inject them with testosterone for money.
Yeah. Speaking about that, when I was in the States recently, pretty much everybody in the States is on TRT. It's just ridiculous. If you don't even necessarily have to be 30, 35 years of age, everybody's on TRT. It's just almost considered required at this point if you want to have any sort of any age whatsoever in jiu-jitsu. It sort of just has leveled the playing field, and it's almost more unusual to be natural than not. But there are some just extreme examples. Like I met a guy whose testosterone levels are something like 5,000, and to be normal is around about 800 to 1,000, depending on how old you are. As you get older, that number drops, can go down to sort of 700, 600. And this guy who's probably in his early 30s, and he's pretty big, but his levels are literally in the thousands. I'm like,
yeah,
that doesn't seem healthy. But my response to what currently is the biggest cultural problem in grappling, I totally agree with you on both. I think this steroids is one, and definitely misogyny is another. A big issue I see as well is this. There's a sort of a creeping extreme element coming into jiu-jitsu that, especially in no-gi, not so much in the gi, but in no-gi, where it's almost treated like a light version of MMA. And you've got this very hardcore sort of extreme element who basically they want to scrap and they want to fight in no-gi, much like they would in MMA. And I'm talking about like clubbing people, slamming them, headbutting them, throwing them off the mats, throwing them into tables and stuff. And I'm like, that's not really jiu-jitsu. And just because you've taken the gi off, it doesn't suddenly make all those things acceptable. For
Mm-hmm.
me, I'm thinking if you want to fight, if you want to scrap, go do MMA. If you want to club each other, if you want to smack each other around, there exists a perfectly acceptable format to do that. And it's called MMA. If you want to have a fight, go and fight.
Mm-hmm.
But people have taken this level of sort of what they consider sort of physicality, and they've brought that over into no-gi. And I think it's retarded. I'll be honest
It's
with you.
it's almost as if the two are connected, like giant meatheads on steroids clubbing each other around the head.
Yeah, good point. That might very well be the case. Yeah.
Are you
Uh,
talking about competing or competing or training?
well, I personally haven't seen too much of that happen in the gym. I think that most gyms are pretty sensible and they'll regulate that, so they won't let things get too out of hand in training and in practice, because that's not a good way to retain students, right? If you've got people throwing each other around and bouncing off walls and slamming each other off the mats. But in competition, yes. And I think that I think that who's at fault is the tournament organizers and the referees for allowing things to get to that stage. Because there's a great quote, isn't there, about, culture is not what you promote, it's about what you tolerate. And if you are
Right.
letting people get away with these things, then you're basically saying it's okay to do that. If they were to shut that down, or if the moment that somebody comes out with a super hard collar tie and slaps somebody across the head and face, and then the moment that they're driving somebody off the mats into the table on purpose, like they've literally targeted that area to try and take somebody down. But I just think that that is absolutely against the ethos of jiu-jitsu and grappling in general, and that should be penalized accordingly. But so
Yeah,
I
I
see that
mean,
as a bit of a cultural problem that's just sort of like pervasive. It's getting worse and worse.
yeah, I agree with that. I mean, as a promoter, you're kind of in a bit of a pickle. Like, I agree with what you're saying, but at the same token, it can be quite exciting to have that begin to build up. But there's a fine line between kind of a bit of kind of playful aggression and then kind of meathead behavior, like you said.
Do
Yeah.
we need to see it from the hobbyists, the weekend warriors at the local tournaments though?
No,
That's
no, no,
that's
no,
that's
no.
where I see it and I feel the
I know what you
most
mean. Yeah, yeah,
uncomfortable.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So we've got some good questions about Scramble actually. We've got some really good questions, and this is all you to answer now. But Jean-Luc JJ, one of your sponsored athletes, wants to know
Never heard of him.
what exactly drives you in your head to create new products when it comes to clothes? That's it. That's a great question, actually, because Scramble is quite unique. You do things a lot differently to other brands, and you've always brought out items that maybe you wouldn't see other brands making. So where does that come from?
I wonder if this question is specifically related to clothing or just, the brand in general, but I guess I'm going to answer
He
it.
says clothes. He says create new products when it comes to clothes, but I guess that could also mean
I'm going
training
to give
gear.
a general answer because they're all kind of the same. Like, I guess as a sort of creative person, you kind of have, it's almost like, there's like an urge to create things,
Mm.
but it comes and goes. So you might have a week of no inspiration, maybe even 2 weeks, and then suddenly you'll see something that will make you think. It's really weird. Like, it almost starts off as wanting to imitate something cool that you've seen,
Mm.
or like something that inspired you a little bit, and then you sort of take that idea, whatever it is, and then start messing around with it and kind of apply your own twist to it, or let your creativity come out, which you've built up over the last 10, 20 years or whatever.
Is it that old
And
saying that good artists copy, great artists steal?
yeah, there's definitely. I mean, I look at other industries a lot, um, to see kind of what they're doing, and I mean, even those guys are, yeah, like you said, everybody's drawing inspiration from everybody else. But sometimes I worry that no, I used to worry that creative sort of drive would go away. But now I understand it just comes and goes, and you can't really
Mhm.
force it. So there might be a week or two where nothing happens. Then you'll frantically design like 5 or 6 new items, then it will go quiet again. We got a good backlog now at Scramble of things that have been sampled and are just waiting to go, because we had like a brief burst of activity where we sampled loads of cool stuff. I actually really admire car makers, because you're essentially building the same item every year, right? It's a vehicle that takes you from A to B. It's got 4 wheels, a steering wheel, but they managed to reinvent it from top to bottom every single year. And when you see the new one, the old one looks so unbelievably old and shit that you're like, how the hell did I ever want to drive that thing? Like, I sometimes think about the gi like that, because we're quite limited by what we can do by the IBJJF. And I want to be I'd love to be able to kind of reinvent it, but still keep it within the legal limits, which is a bit of a challenge. Like, I'm kind of bored now of normal gi designs, because it's just moving logos around on a gi. So
Right.
we've got a couple of things coming. We've got a new gi coming maybe this month if we're lucky, just waiting for the boat to land. And something else we're doing with the gi as well, like a pretty radical sort of overhaul. But that was again inspired by something else, which, I mean, I don't know if I should talk about it. It's not really a big deal, but it's just the construction of it. Like, I've had enough of pushing logos around gis. I want to fundamentally change something. Yeah. So I don't know. It's just a drive. That's all it is.
Rob Horton BJJ, or Rob Horton.bjj, wants to know which sponsored athletes have had the biggest impact for Scramble, in your opinion. That's a great question, because you've sponsored so many guys over the years. Some of them you've been sponsoring for years, right? So
yeah, that is a tough one, because I don't want to kind of neglect any of our athletes. Every single person on the team is really important, but I will say in particular that we've got a very tight European squad at the moment, and Europe is doing really well. And we spending much less on advertising in Europe at the moment, but everything is growing really well still. So you got to put that down to people like Mateus and Camille doing leg lock camp, head to toe in Scramble all the time. Santeri doing fucking smashing every trials, running an amazing academy, always in Scramble. Mo, that we spoke about last time. Loads more, but I don't want to start listing them, otherwise I'll have to list every single person and possibly make a mistake. But the European group that we have now is really good, and I can see like a positive impact from them. So yeah.
That's cool. Follow-up question from Rob: that how important is content to you when you are looking to sponsor an athlete for Scramble? I guess that what he's asking then is that, do athletes need to be content producers as much as they do, focusing on the jiu-jitsu and just going out there and competing?
Damn, I mean, it's almost like the number one thing, honestly, especially if there's a paid component, because you're essentially paying for advertising. And
Right.
It really doesn't matter if you're incredible at jiu-jitsu and nobody knows about it, because, that doesn't help you and doesn't help us either. So being good at content creation is one of the number one things. And I know why he's asking that, because his content is really good. Yeah.
But it's true though, right? Visibility is everything. And that's why you would choose to associate with an athlete. So whether it is visibility by competing regularly on large events, or whether it is visibility as somebody who maybe is not even known as a competitor, maybe somebody who's a teacher, but
Definitely.
has a really good online presence and is known for that. And that's huge, right? I can think of just, examples like you said, Camille and Mateus, they're as known for their technical side of things as they are for their competition exploits. And somebody like Jason Rao, that you've been sponsoring him for years, but he's been hurt for a few years now, hasn't competed, I think, in about 3 years, but constantly putting out really good technical content.
Yeah, every post he puts out kills it. Massive amounts of likes and views. Yeah, really good.
And Joao Miao as well. He's not really competing too much outside of masters divisions in local IBJJF tournaments, and yet million followers on Instagram and king of TikTok.
He's gold dust, Joao. He's amazing. Yeah, I was like not hesitant, but I wasn't sure which way that sponsorship would go, and it ended up going really well. So I'm really
Yeah.
happy about that.
Yeah, I don't think anybody expected Jamal to become this, an influencer like he is, which is
Yeah, he's
considering that
hilarious
his
though.
his personality in the early days of his career. He was obviously very quiet, very reserved. Didn't really do
Yeah,
much outside of just competing. But man, he's changed so much, and
mm,
he's one of the best guys to follow for sure.
definitely.
So funny. Hand.grapple has a question about how has or where has starting multiple businesses taken you that you never thought you would go? I wonder if that's figuratively or
Yeah,
literally, where have you been? But I suppose you can answer both.
yeah. I mean, just consider myself very, very lucky. Yeah, physically gone to all kinds of amazing places. Front row at CJI, front row at the first quintet where like Team Polaris killed everyone. And then just yeah, I don't know. I don't like to talk about it too much, but I'm just really happy that we kind of made that leap early on, and would encourage anyone who's had ideas about doing their own thing to give it a go anyway. I mean, there's is it was it Jim Carrey? I don't know, but he basically said you can fail at doing the thing you don't want to do anyway, so you might as well fail trying to do the thing that you do want to do.
That's great. That's really
Yeah.
cool. Got a couple of questions about Polaris, actually. A good one from Choklock OG.
Oh yeah.
You wrote an article a little while ago now on a website. I think it was called Buy Me a Coffee. And he's
Mm-hmm.
asked that how would you update your Buy Me a Coffee article on athlete conduct for pro shows? How would you update that for 2026? So I guess, first of all, you would need to explain a little what that article was, right?
It was basically a guide to for people that want to be professional jiu-jitsu athletes. To be
From the
honest, like
perspective as an event promoter.
yeah, like the stuff that we
Yeah.
want to see or hear. And honestly, I wouldn't really update it because it all still holds true. If you want to be on a professional show, you must have high resolution photographs of yourself. We live in an age where you literally have a fucking 36 megapixel camera in your pocket. You would not believe what we get sent for Polaris. It's like it will take you 2 seconds to stand in front of a wall and get a picture. And we get sent tiny little like 14 kilobyte files. They look like shit on the poster. They look like shit on the broadcast. Don't do it. Just have a little folder. Get a mate to take some pictures. Um, there's a little bit in there about money. There's man, you're not becoming a millionaire on pro jiu-jitsu, not in any short space of time. You need a realistic view on what you're worth. We've had plenty of people. The conversations just died instantly because they want some crazy amount of money, especially like on a debut or whatever. Especially bearing in mind if you're flying yourself around the world to compete all the time, there's no point turning around and asking a pro show for thousands of pounds because you're not demonstrating your own value in that way. We do think it's really important to sell tickets. I know there's like a bit of a, is it or is it not the athlete's job to sell tickets? But it kind of is
Yeah.
because, you're being invited on, you're being paid, you're expected to bring, the reason why you're being given an opportunity as a professional is you're expected to be bringing fans with you, people that want to see you compete or they want to watch you online. If nobody wants to see you compete and nobody wants to watch you online, then you have no chance of being a professional athlete, basically. So, I mean, MMA guys have been doing it for years. If you give an MMA guy 20 quid to go and get his teeth punched in, he's going to sell 100 tickets to his friends and family every weekend.
Right.
Jiu-jitsu people are very different. Yeah. And then just like you got to promote your match. We get a lot of people that sign the contract and then never mention anything and then just turn up on the day. They haven't sold any tickets. They've barely mentioned it. It's just not, it doesn't help anyone.
Yeah.
Um, be entertaining because that's the main thing. Like the best possible example is Sakuraba. I mean, he probably has a losing record when you look at it, but everybody knows his name because he was so exciting. Yeah, there's a few more like what we were talking about, cultivating your social media, because it is kind of the number one thing at the moment. It's pretty much the first thing that we look at, whether it's sponsorship or looking for matches. You want to know how many people are interested in what this person is doing. So it's down to you to develop that. And if you don't want to develop it, that's fine. But you probably won't be, sponsored or on a pro show, which is obviously fine. Not everyone wants to do that. But if you're reaching out to these brands or these events, then you need to have a strong social media presence.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't really update it. I wrote it 2 years ago, still there. Yeah.
Oh, it's great information. Honestly, I think prospective competitors, and to be honest, a few established competitors could do very well from reading that. There's a lot to learn from that article because for a lot of these guys, nobody really teaches you what is required to be a professional competitor and to compete on these big pro shows. There's a lot of information on there about how to get good at jiu-jitsu, and there's not really too much information on there about how to get good on the business side of jiu-jitsu. And there are some resources if you want to run an academy, and you can join groups and business mentorships and so on. But if you're a prospective competitor looking to make your way on that side of things, there's not a lot of information to kind of guide you through that process.
Or guidance, in general.
Yeah, and that article is definitely very useful for people. Check it out. Brandon wants to know, when will Polaris do a Royal Rumble?
Yeah, don't know. This
is a funny question, I guess, because obviously he's joking, but I guess maybe the question more is how much are you willing to mess around with the format? Because you've done so many interesting things with Polaris. You've had straight up super fights, you've had GPs, you've had the squads, which is incredible. That's pretty close to a Royal Rumble, I suppose. But you've definitely always had a willingness to experiment with the format of the show, right?
Yeah, and literally every time I watch something to do with WWE or pro wrestling, I'm like, we need more of that in pro jiu-jitsu. Just yesterday, I finished the Unreal documentary on Netflix, which is the kind of behind the scenes at WWE. And then before that, I watched it was a Japanese drama about pro wrestling. But they're just such highly developed industries based entirely around entertainment that it's really inspirational. Like I do wonder how much we can insert into jiu-jitsu and still maintain the kind of integrity of the sport, but make it super exciting. I mean, I used to love WWE when I was a kid, and then I sort of fell out of it. I'm actually considering getting right back into it because man, I nearly shed a tear watching that documentary when
wow,
it was John Cena turning heel. I don't know do you follow WWE at all?
Not since I was young. I definitely followed it when I was younger, like you, and I fell out of it as I grew up. But I'm still pretty aware of kind of like a couple of the big names and stuff. But even I heard about John Cena coming back not too long ago and turning heel, and that was a huge moment in the world of pro wrestling, right?
I mean, because he was like 15, maybe 17 years or something of being a babyface, like good guy, and then the writers sort of sat down and went, "Listen, you're going to turn heel." And he was like, "Fuck yeah." And then when he did it, there was like 70,000 people in an arena just like, oh my God. Like it really kind of changing the legacy that he's built up over that time. It was such a powerful moment that, it made me think like, I don't know. But you can't really do it in jiu-jitsu. It's so unpredictable. So I don't know.
Well, it's the difference between scripted and non-scripted, right? WWE and pro wrestling is sports entertainment, but of course it is scripted, and they're able to sit down and think about these stories, and basically that's it. That's what you will see with the chaos of a real live sports event, a competition. You don't have that luxury, but like you said, I'm sure there's some things you can draw inspiration from, right?
Yeah.
Another couple of Polaris questions from Richard, Attack the Back. He wants to know, with the inclusion of the content house for the female squads event and the success of it, have the Polaris team considered an Ultimate Fighter style reality show for Polaris? Maybe this could lead into like a number one contender spot, so you can build a storyline for the title. Have you thought about Road to UFC BJJ Ultimate Fighter style reality show kind of program?
Yes, definitely. I mean, we sort of pushed the idea around a couple of years ago. We briefly looked into like hiring a big house and getting 2 teams with 2 coaches, but never really did it. And then it kind of morphed into the squads that we've done all year, apart from the Croydon show. We've had a mansion or like a big house with all the athletes in, and we've done a little bit of content. It's good, but I don't know, the UFC's version kind of reminded me, and then why it's not always that much fun to have a camera on a big group of jiu-jitsu athletes, because you'd have to pre-select them for having big personalities for sure.
Yeah.
Like if we did it, so there's a Japanese promotion called Breaking Down, which is I don't know if you've seen any of that.
No, I haven't touched it.
It's kind of controversial because it's like subverting the Japanese MMA industry, and they get millions and millions of views on YouTube. It's one of the main rising fighters, Mikuru Asakura, is basically underground, like fucking gangster fighting.
Okay, I have seen this.
Yeah.
Black cage, quite small venue.
Yeah.
Quite edgy fights.
Oh, like insane. But
I've seen it.
The way they built it up is they traveled around Japan. It's like a like a vlog documentary style thing, just looking for like tough dudes sort of thing. But they would get them all in, they'd walk the streets literally, like hanging out in shit areas, which do exist in Japan.
Right.
Find some tough guys, tell them, right, we'll see you in the gym at 7 o'clock tonight. And then they would pack a local gym with like 50 nutters. And then they would like interview them on the spot and make them stand up. And you got a few people that just kind of give up under the spotlight. And then you've got some that can obviously talk a lot of shit and have loads of confidence. Then they just make those 2 guys fight straight away. And like, it's just the wildest shit, but it's all about the personalities of the people. So if we were ever going to do something like that, which we haven't spoke about in depth, but I would make sure that the people on it had big personalities.
Right.
And you would do it with auditions where you give people a chance to stand up and basically talk shit. And if they can't do it, they wouldn't be on.
There have only been 3 reality TV shows in the history of in jiu-jitsu, sort of to follow the model of the Ultimate Fighter, and the first was, of course, the brown belt kumite that Lloyd Irving did way back. I think that was 2012, 2013, somewhere around there. There was the flow grappling Who's Next, WNX, that was done I think at the end of 2020, and then you had the Ultimate Fighter, of course, the Ultimate Fighting Championship, the Road to UFC BJJ. So 3 very, very different products that followed roughly the same model, ultimately picking a group of guys, having a couple of teams, having big personalities, all fighting for the opportunity to, either get a title shot or be declared the number 1 guy. They worked pretty well. They're all enjoyable enough for their own, when you compared them against each other, there were similarities, but they were all different enough, but they were enjoyable. But I do feel that there's so much to be gained from, like you just said, to building up personalities, because it can be a long road to the top otherwise for a guy to come in, to have to put in all that groundwork, to develop his profile, to build his personality, to connect with fans before making it into the upper echelons of the pro levels. And a vehicle like this can accelerate that so much. Whereas if you leave it to them, if it's all their responsibility, the process can either be very slow or it can never take off, right? So I definitely see a lot of benefits from running something like that. But there is a big question about the cost, the investment required to make something like that happen, and whether you actually get the desired return on that investment. Because I was with Flow when they made that. I wasn't particularly involved in the production of the show because it was just a separate thing while we had all this other stuff going on. So I was focused on sort of running the day-to-day flow. Flow Grappling site while the production of the show was happening. And I mean, they spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on running that. And it was a very streamlined production. It was a very sort of run and gun style, they call it, in production, which makes me think that when Dana White is talking about investing $10 to $12 million into BJJ over the space of the next couple of years, I do wonder how much of that budget has been put aside to run UFC BJJ or road to UFC BJJ this year, and we'll probably see another season next year, I would imagine. So I can imagine that that's where the majority of that money has gone.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, maybe they'll do a bigger and better one for season 2.
I hope so. I'd love to see it. It's a great way of identifying talent and putting them before the audience, right?
Yeah, I just want to add one thing. We do have a number one contender. We have a thing we do called Contenders, and in February we're kicking off our amateur events, just pay to play, regular everyday or daytime jiu-jitsu competitions, and we're running a 70-kilo tournament, and the winner will face Ethan Krellenstein. And also a 77-kilo tournament, and the winner will get a spot in a Grand Prix later in the year with probably be 20,000 on the line, which is cool. But we will make a story out of that number one contender spot. There's a lot of good people signed up for it, and we'll be there to sort of document it and see how they do on the day, and then how they do against Ethan. So there'll be a bit of a story there.
That would be awesome. That would be really cool. So moving on now, those are the Polaris questions. And we have some kind of random questions just about jiu-jitsu and grappling in general. Tamlin88 asks, are Europeans at a big disadvantage against judo or wrestlers from the US and Dagestan? Well, that is a really interesting question. Yeah. I guess we need to kind of break it down a little bit as to how you might perceive the Europeans to be at a disadvantage. And it specifically says judo and wrestling, but I'll be honest, I don't really see the style as being a factor in this, because when you look at those two locations, the US and the Dagestan, two very different locations. US is a gigantic country of 300 million people or so, and Dagestan is a tiny federal republic of Russia. It is basically, in effect, is a state within Russia. And Dagestan is known as being the home of the best grapplers and fighters in Russia as a whole. Of course, they're fighters from all over the country, but they do produce the more Olympic gold medalists per capita than anywhere else in Russia. And they definitely have the best MMA fighters, the best judo practitioners, the best wrestlers. They all come from this tiny, tiny region. And a big part of that is just it's cultural. These guys are they're training to fight from a very, very early age. And Dagestan is not a particularly rich province. It's very small. It's very mountainous outside of the main city. It is not a particularly high quality of life. You've just got lots and lots of tiny mountain villages dotted around, and there's not a lot else to do. And I think just part of the culture there is that kids don't grow up playing soccer. They grow up wrestling and fighting. And it's a very hard, very martial, very macho culture as well, where men are expected to fight. There's a lot of there's a lot of factors, a lot of questions about honor and respect, and the moment that somebody is perceived to be disrespected, or if there's any kind of feud between families or between people in the same village, then it's settled with a scrap. So there's a reason why Dagestan is producing so many amazing fighters and amazing competitors, because they will obviously come through that, not just a system, but just that entire culture. And that is where they're funneled. They're funneled into athletic success as a result. Or they just become hard people up to no good. With the Americans, and it's very different because, there is the scholastic system, and kids are put into wrestling very young in certain parts in the States. It's not nationwide. There are pockets of wrestling across the country where kids will start 3-4 years of age, and then there are other parts of the country where kids won't start wrestling until they're in sort of middle school, 12-13 years of age. But definitely it's an advantage. If you start any kind of grappling style, whether it is judo or wrestling, at an early age, and then you switch to jiu-jitsu and grappling slightly later, sort of maybe say around 15, 16, 18, it can be an incredible base, and it can definitely accelerate your development and your progress if you then go on to become a competitor. Are Europeans at a big disadvantage? Well, again, Europe is in a very large and diverse area. We're talking about a continent. So, not all European countries are the same, because every European country has a different level of jiu-jitsu and grappling. But I don't feel that we're at a huge disadvantage, because ultimately what it comes down to is the level of technique. And the level of technique is, jiu-jitsu is very democratic nowadays, because there's no barrier to entry anymore. All the information is out there. You can find good jiu-jitsu anywhere you go. It's a case of that, it used to be that the best technique was almost guarded and hidden and not shared. That's just not a worry anymore. You can go online, you can find anything that you need to know, and everybody's got access to the internet. So wherever you are, you can get good jiu-jitsu. What it really comes down to is, do you have the human resources? Do you have the training partners necessary to create a strong team? And there are many, many places in Europe that have really healthy communities of grapplers and really high level training partners. Obviously the UK, Poland, France, and there are a number of other countries that are coming through with really solid grapplers as well. We're seeing guys coming out of places like Spain, which never historically was a high level grappling country. Ireland is very, very strong for the size of the nation and for the amount of population. The Irish grapplers are very, very good. I've met a
really
number of
good.
them personally. Yeah, we've seen them in action, and their jiu-jitsu is very, very good. The Scandinavian countries were actually ahead of the curve in Europe for many years. Like, those guys got onto jiu-jitsu in the late 90s, early 2000s, and for a very long time, those guys were, among the sort of the best grapplers in the continent. There are still some great examples, but less so, just because they don't have the big populations. And we're seeing it everywhere. It really doesn't matter whether it is Eastern Europe, whether we're talking about former Yugoslavian countries, whether we're talking about, Eastern Europe. There's some great guys coming out of places like Hungary and places like that. So there's some really, really tough guys everywhere you go. Are they at a big disadvantage? I think the only disadvantage that they have compared to US and places like Dagestan is maybe they haven't competed as long at as high a level. That's the big issue, because these guys from the US and from places like Dagestan are just competing so much, so often, that by the time they arrive to sort of the pro ranks, they have a lot of experience, and they are good competitors. Whereas a lot of the Europeans are good jiu-jitsu practitioners, but they don't have that same time in the spotlight and the same experience competing in high pressure events. And that, I think, is the only thing that they really, really need to catch up on. But yeah, in terms of across the board, I don't see a great difference. We see good Europeans beating good Americans, beating Brazilians, beating guys from Dagestan. So long answer, I'm afraid, but yeah, I don't see a huge disadvantage.
Interesting. I agree. I'm always fascinated by kind of nation versus nation, and it's sort of a nation's character against another nation's character. I think it's like a kind of legacy from how like Pride used to promote their matches. It was Fedor, the cold-blooded Russian killer, versus the like fiery, passionate Brazilian, or the stoic Japanese. Like, I really like all those little kind of generalizations. But everything else is just like you said. At the high level, it's not really about nations. It's about how hard and how well that individual is trained.
Exactly. Lil Zilla the Grappler asks, favorite Japanese fighter or promotion? Ooh, that's a tough one. You go first.
Man, I fucking love Rising. Rising is amazing. It is Pride, like 100%. I don't know if you know the story about Saki Kabara. They sold Pride to the UFC, and then he was sent off on, I think, 10 years of gardening leave where he was paid handsomely by the UFC not to start another promotion. And then I think pretty much the second that was up, he started rising with all the same people, probably all the same shady shenanigans behind the scenes. But rising is pride, basically. Like the production levels, the way they tell the stories. If anyone's kind of misses Pride, I urge you now to go and watch anything from Rising, and also check out their YouTube channel, because they do a thing called Rising Confessions, which is like long form, like 45-minute to an hour episodes in between each show. And it's just classic Pride style storytelling. They film everything from the fighters arriving, fighters sobbing in the back room when they've lost, it's just so good, so good. And usually the videos have English subtitles as well. It might take a week or two for them to show up, or maybe you can get the automatic ones. But yeah, Rising is good. And I really like, there's a guy called Ren Hiramoto. I don't know if you know him. He's like he's a kickboxing guy, but he's like a classic Japanese bad boy. He's covered in tattoos, he's talking shit to people. I just really like that image, because most Japanese fighters are not like that. So that stuff's fun. And like you look at his Instagram, it's just pure, decadent lifestyle, money everywhere, and there's another guy like that called Kyohei, I think it's Hagiwara. Yeah, and he's the same. Like he's got fucking these like big samurai sword tattoos coming out of his, going up his back, and he's had a couple of battles with that guy. It's just classic old school Pride, like two big characters going up against each other in an arena. It's fucking awesome. How about you?
Hang on a second. How about a favorite Japanese fighter then? A current or inactive?
Yeah, those guys, Ren Hiramoto and Kyohei
Those are the guys you like.
Hagiwara. They're fun. Yeah.
I haven't really followed the Japanese scene for the last couple of years. I was big into MMA before I really sort of switched my focus purely to Jiu-Jitsu, and because I used to work in MMA, right? We both did, and I used to cover a lot of Japanese MMA, but that was during the era of actual Pride was still around, but also just during that incredible era, sort of in the mid 2000s, of when you had these fantastic huge events. I was always a massive fan of K1 Heroes. I used to love K1 Heroes. K1 Max I used to love, which was the K1 Max was the lightweight kickboxers up to 70 kilos, and then K1 Heroes was K1 started doing MMA as well, and that was really, really fun. It's so hard to pick a Japanese fighter that is my favorite, because there were so many who were just so inspirational for me back in the day. I was a huge fan of guys like Kid Yamamoto, of guys like Genki Sudo. I used to love Gomi when he was considered the number one. Yeah, he was considered the number one lightweight in the world there for a while. Yep. So there were some amazing Japanese guys who really inspired me a lot back then, because we touched on it, I think, a couple of episodes ago, about how Genki Sudo was so far ahead of his time when it came to grappling, and he was doing things that you just never saw anybody else do. And I used to watch those Japanese events, and I would just see these flashes of brilliance, technical brilliance that you just would not see anywhere else. So the Japanese, they were so inspiring to me for that. I think it was really, really cool. I haven't really followed the Japanese scene for a very long time, unfortunately, and I feel very disconnected to it, which is a shame. You've inspired me to go check out Rising now.
Yeah,
I'm gonna go.
I think I subscribed and I forgot to cancel, but Rising does like an all-in-one package where you can go back and watch old events and stuff. And,
nice!
It's so good. Yeah, really good.
Yeah, really is. Leo_.LWSNJJJ. What was it like when you went to Japan for the first time? At the beginning of your trip? Ooh, okay. Well, your trip ended up being quite a long time. So you were there for how many years?
4 years, give or take.
Yeah. There you go.
I saw this question and I thought about it, because I got one little story that kind of sums up the beginning of the kind of Japan experience. I'd been training jiu-jitsu for a couple of years in Sydney, and I was really, I'd been bitten by the bug big time. So one of the first things I did was find out where I could train in Fukuoka, which is my wife's hometown. And there was two major gyms at the time. One's called Axis, which goes back to Hickson Gracie, and the other one was Pariestra, which goes back to Yuki Nakai. And I tried Axis. It was decent. It was a fairly run-of-the-mill like jiu-jitsu academy. And then I went to Pariestra, and I was fascinated because the subtitle of Pariestra is Shuto and Jiu-Jitsu. So almost every school had an MMA component and a jiu-jitsu component combined, or running separately. But the school's identity was like combat. It wasn't just jiu-jitsu or whatever.
Right.
There was Shuto, which is essentially MMA, and jiu-jitsu. And when I got there, the coach, Tomari-san, was away competing in Brazil, because he was, he was like a classic small gi guy, would go to Brazil every year, do the Brasileiras or the Worlds or whatever. Probably end up getting smashed by like fucking Kayatera or somebody, but he did it. And so it was the MMA coach was the only guy there, and he was like the ultimate Japanese MMA stoic. His name was Ueno Kyuhei. Very thick build, like a classic kind of, almost like, not like a punch perm, but like old school Japanese, very stone-faced, kind of like, it's really weird. It's like not shy, but like just not very outgoing.
Reserved,
yeah. And I said, I want to do some training. I think we did like a full-on MMA class. There was a bit of striking, bit of grappling, and I got my ass kicked. Like, it only took about 3 lessons before I was like, there's no way I'm doing MMA. I got people kicked the shit out of my legs, fucking smashing me in the face. And the grappling was very different to what I was used to, really athletic, really aggressive, like MMA-based grappling, basically. But I was like, this is fucking awesome, But the thing that stood out to me was, he kind of hardly said anything, and I kind of got the, impression that he was like, yeah, whatever, take it or leave it. But then at the end of the class, he was like, where do you live? And I said, I live in this fucking place, which was, I had to get like 2 buses to get there. And he said, I'll drive you home. And I was like, okay. But the guy did not know me. I just walked in. He just taught a class. And he said, yeah, wait a minute. Cleaned the mat, closed the gym, got in his car, just drove me straight back home to my door, And I was like, shit. And that kind of really set the tone for what things are like in Japan, Like hard training, reserved personalities, but a real generosity of spirit, Yeah,
That's
it was
really
nice.
cool.
It was really cool.
That's a great story. That's a great story. I've been to Japan a couple of times, but unfortunately, I've never spent longer than about 5 days in country on any of my visits. It's such a shame, because it's every time I've gone, I've just had this amazing desire to want to stick around and just to hang out more and meet people and really kind of like get a feel for the place. It's always been very superficial, but at the same time, it's always been just so interesting, because it really is a different world. It just is, could not be more different from somebody coming from Europe or America or wherever else. You go there and it's
The
just like,
valleys.
wow. Yeah. All the valleys. Yeah. It's just so different. It really is. But that's really cool.
The quintet trip was good though, wasn't it?
That was fantastic. Yeah, that was one of my favorites. That was a really good one. Yeah, I've been lucky enough that every time I've gone to Japan, it's been for jiu-jitsu. I went for a couple of AJP Grand Slam events, which are the big tournaments in the gi, and the quintet. Always Tokyo, but big goal of mine to definitely go back, explore a little bit more, go do some training, because I went to plenty of gyms when I was over there, but unfortunately, I never got to roll. So
yeah,
need to make sure that happens at some point in the future. Then the last question is Chill-Jitsu. Thoughts on the overall hygiene of the BJJ community? This is a funny one. Hygiene. Yeah. Are we talking about mental hygiene or are we talking about physical hygiene? No, in terms of hygiene, I don't know. My answer to that would be it depends where you're going, because in terms of hygiene, I think maybe he's talking about possibly like the sort of mat transmitted diseases like ringworm and staph and stuff like that. And man, story for me is that when I lived and trained in the UK, the first gym that I really trained at from white to purple belt, it was a basement gym in Manchester. I started at SBG in Manchester with Carl Tanswell back in the day, and we had a basement gym in a not very nice area where we used to get lots of smackheads walking around, and we used to get people coming into the gym and trying to steal stuff. And then it was definitely, I think there was a methadone clinic around the corner. It was definitely a bit of a sketchy area.
Right.
And considering that we had like almost no ventilation in this basement gym, and there were no showers in the gym as well, man, I never got any infections or anything at all. Like training there from white to purple belt, I never had any mat infections whatsoever. No ringworm, no staph, nothing. And then I moved to Newcastle, and I trained at an MMA stroke Thai boxing gym for a couple of years when I was up there. And I think I got ringworm 3 times in the space of 6 months training there. And it was filthy. So it was kind of weird. But then when I moved to Brazil, you would think tropical climate in Rio de Janeiro, you'd think, people just walking off the street in flip-flops and then, kicking their shoes off and going straight onto the mat without washing or cleaning or anything. Nobody would shower before training. Matt, again, same thing. Never had a single skin infection the entire time I lived in Brazil, 8 years. Not a single skin infection. The
Crazy.
difference was that we had showers, so we would shower immediately after training. But I just didn't see it. It's almost like it didn't exist. Nobody ever had staph. Nobody ever was off the mat with any kind of mat infections or anything like that. And, in terms of cleaning the mats, there wasn't really a lot of attention paid to that. I think after the mats, after the training, they would sweep the mats and stuff. But we didn't have like those big pools of sweat like you see in some clips online. And I've been to gyms that have that. Didn't have those big puddles of sweat across the mats, so didn't really need to clean it off quite as much. And then when I moved to the States, same thing. You had these big gyms with beautiful mats, beautiful facilities, and they would be almost a little bit obsessive about cleaning the mats before practice, after practice, spraying them down with disinfectant and everything. Same thing, man. I saw so much ringworm, mat funk, staph, and it's I had it a couple of times myself, in the 5 years I lived in the States. It's so weird how it changed so much on location, but it's like I can never really put my finger as to why, and I always found it curious that the gyms that were so anal about hygiene and made all the efforts to clean the mats would have the most ringworm and staph. Weird,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, bizarre. Man, we never spoke about it or saw it in Japan either, nor Australia. I wonder if there's just a general increased prevalence of this type of thing. Like those skin diseases kind of resisting antibiotics and stuff like that. But I don't know. Like Japan's very hygienic. They grow up cleaning the schools. That's their job.
Right.
Kids have to clean the schools. They have to clean the floor. They have to do all this stuff, and it's just ingrained into them. I remember thinking that almost all the gyms I trained at were just spotless. Some more than others, and like the headquarters of Palestra, what used to be a bit of a dungeon underground, very smelly little room.
I've been there. Yeah, tiny little space.
Yeah. Considering what a hotbed of talent it was, it's like a nothing space in a dead suburb of Tokyo. But that place was pretty grim, although they did renovate it. I don't know if you went. You've probably been there since they renovated it, and they have nice mat walls and stuff. Or
no, I think the last time I went, it was 2018 or something like that. So
okay. So you got the full like black wall, black mold experience then.
Yeah, it was the OG experience.
And just one toilet. That's it.
Yes.
There's no changing, just a single toilet.
No change rooms, no nothing. Yeah.
But no, I never heard of it. And then in the last few years, it's been ringworm, people getting staph here and there. So I don't know. I mean, I feel like we're all pretty hygienic. Like I'm super self-conscious about, I don't want to be the stinky guy on the mat. So everything's like always cleaned. And, if I can't have a shower, then I'm like having a wash. And, I just don't want to turn up being stinky. And hopefully, I think most other people feel the same.
Yeah, it's not rocket science. Number one, keep your training gear clean. Number two, just wash yourself off, even if it's in a hand basin immediately after training, if you can't take a shower, or just get home and have a shower as soon as possible. Just don't be this messy guy, and don't walk around barefoot off the mats and then tread that shit onto the mats, because that's where the stuff comes in. So not rocket science. Well, cool. I mean, that's the end of the questions that we had from our viewers, stroke listeners today. It was really cool. Had some really good stories there. Cool. Well, we'll be back next week with another episode. Make sure to like and subscribe, follow, whether it's on Spotify, whether it's on Apple. Please leave us a review. Those help a lot. If you're watching this or listening to this on YouTube, please make sure to hit the like button, because that really helps boost our content even more so than subscribing. Leave a comment. Tell us what you thought of this episode. Let us know what you'd like to see for future episodes. We'll see you next time.